There's a lot of little questions about big things that could happen this season. We're going to talk about it today in our last mailbag edition before training camp here on Locked On Jaguars.
You are Locked On Jaguars, your daily Jacksonville Jaguars podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You heard what she said. It's your team every day. We thank you for making us your first listen here on Locked On Jaguars. Glad to have you as always. Make sure you get yourself on over to YouTube. If you watch podcasts every single day, go over to the Locked On Jaguars YouTube page. Make sure you hit the like button. I'm going to say it again. Hit that like button. Also hit subscribe and then hit the bell so you receive notifications each and every time we drop an episode. And then wherever you listen to your podcast, if you listen to audio podcasts while you're cheating at work or while you're in the car, make sure you tap into that location so you don't miss an episode of the show. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. And shout out to the everydayers for joining us every single day. And you can be an everydayer too. All you got to do is join us every single day. All right. By the time we get to our destination today, if y'all ever wonder where I get that from, I'm going to tell you that's something that came off of International Lover of the Prince 1999 album. Hello, this is your pilot speaking or whatever. Anyway, go check that song out if you will. But by the time we get to our destination today, we'll talk about old but new uniforms. What kind of sense did that make? Talking about little things. A lot of little questions I noticed in my call out for mailbag questions. In the middle of the show, we'll hit on those little things that could turn into big issues as to why the Jacksonville Jaguars, questions that they're going to answer. We're not going to say if it's going to be negative or positive. We're just going to say there are a bunch of little things that are absolutely going to matter by the time the season ends. But training camp is 1 week out. Technically, yeah, it is 1 week out. It's a week from tomorrow. And this is our last mailbag. July 24th is the day of Jaguars training camp. So I thought I'd just give you a little bit of a primer and start asking fans what it is that they're most concerned about. Turns out it's not a whole bunch of big stuff. And that's good. Could be good and could be bad. It means that people think that this team is going to be really, really good. Now, I'm not just talking about optimistic fans. As you noticed the last couple of weeks, I've been pointing out how a lot of people around the country, national folks that have had no reason to change their mind other than the fact that they're trying to hedge their bets, are now all of a sudden thinking real optimistically when it comes to the Jacksonville Jaguars. And, you know, it's never too late for somebody to change their mind or to do or say the right thing. So ain't going to come down too hard on them. We're going to say, hey, man, if you want to join in, you want to get on the bus, fine, get on the bus. But the thing about getting on the bus is you have to stay on the bus. You can't get on the bus and then all of a sudden after 1 week or two, jump off the bus because we're going to see you. We're going to see you and we're going to point it out that you were just running your mouth, right? The thing about it is most of the people, though, that I talked to and the folks that I asked on social media to respond are diehard Jaguar fans, right? And the diehard fans will tell you if there's a big glaring need. Even the most pessimistic person, they're not really talking about and pointing out huge things that they are concerned about with this football team. It's small things or little things like Walker Little. That's one of the people that came up in some mailbag questions. There's this thing with Walker Little, though, that if it happens, it would truly show you. And I'm going to talk about this in the first segment. I'm going to talk about this in segment 2. But there's something that could happen with Walker Little that can be the actual manifestation in the flesh, like you see it, from what the Jaguars ultimately hope that their plan will turn into. It's very, very important that you pay attention to it. And on the flip side of it, there's something that could happen with Walker Little that could be representative of the exact thing that the Jaguars don't want to be. You're wondering what that is. I'm going to let you hang on to that one for a minute because I included Walker Little because I played with the word little a little bit. But he actually, did I say I played with the word little a little bit? Look at me. But he is actually I wouldn't call him the crash test dummy. That's not a good way to put it. But he is the poster child for what they could be what they can be, what they want to be, and what they don't want to be. And I'll explain all of that as we get further. But thinking about a dude right now that is a swing tackle is a good problem, because before training camp, no one's asking who's Trevor going to throw the ball to. No one's asking who's going to block. No one's asking who's going to stop the run. No one's asking those who's going to get sacks. Right? What about the defensive coordinator, man? Is he going to get it right? Nobody's asking any of those questions. And those were the questions that were constantly hanging over the Jacksonville Jaguars. It's like, it's unreal. Like, who's going to be the backup in case this guy goes down? If Trevor gets hurt, do they have a guy that can play for 3 or 4 weeks? All of those questions have seemingly been answered. Now, it doesn't guarantee success. It does not. That's the beauty of playing football. You got to go out and actually play. But it does need to be pointed out that they haven't played games. They haven't practiced. So everything that they were supposed to do up to this point, have they done it? The answer is yes. They didn't put the cart before the horse. You can't. You don't play games. No one knows how it's going to turn out. But if the goal was to get bigger and more physical, they achieved it. They absolutely did. And the thing is, the most physical part of this team, in my opinion, and I said this last year at some point, we all know about the offensive line because their job is to be physical, like all the time. Like, you can't duck away from that. You can't duck away from there's no part of being an offensive lineman where you can take the physicality part out of it and say, okay, yeah, that's good. They're pretty good. No, at some point, if you're going to win, that physicality has to show up. It at the very least has to match the physicality for the other side of the team, or on the team on the other side of the ball. However, they didn't really go out of their way to get way more physical on the offensive line. What they did was get way more healthy on the offensive line. They hope. And make a couple of small additions and kind of round out that unit. I think they want it to be where their 8th best player on their offensive line is as good as their 4th best player in previous years. And maybe the 8th best player right now on their offensive line is a rookie. Is it the foster kid out of Missouri? And they're saying that, eventually at some point, he'll be our 4th or 5th best offensive lineman, or at least the 8th best guy this year is as good as the swing guy was in years prior to that. And the 4th best lineman is as good as the 3rd best lineman. What if you have a situation where a guy like, remember Brandon Linder, how good Brandon Linder was? What if you had a guy, Brandon Linder was their best offensive lineman for years. Well, what if now with this line, Brandon Linder would be your 3rd or 4th best offensive lineman? That means that you're getting better, right? But these are the little things that people are asking about this team this year. And I think it's a breath of fresh air because they are asking about little things as opposed to big things. I'm going to explain to you why that can be a gift and a curse. And then we're going to get into this Walker Little situation where he could be the poster child for player development. And he could also be the poster child for a guy that you used a 2nd round pick on and didn't get a 2nd contract. 2 contrasting points of view about a player that I think is very, very important. We're going to look at the positive side of it. We're going to do all of that in just a second here on Locked On Jaguars. Today's show is brought to you and sponsored by BetterHelp. Man, we've all been in situations where we may need therapy, we may not, we don't know. But at some point when you make the tough decision that that's the way that you want to go, there's no place to go better, in my opinion, than BetterHelp. BetterHelp can ask you questions and get to the bottom of it and help you really be able to deal with the things in life. Like comparison. You always look for validation. Well, comparison is the thief of joy, and it's easy to envy other people's lives. It might look like they have it all together on Instagram, but in reality, they probably don't. And therapy can help you focus on what you want instead of what others have, so you start living your best life. That's right. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. Stop comparing and start focusing with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon to get 10% off your first month of therapy. All right, back here We ain't really gone nowhere, but back here on Locked On Jaguars, we're at your team every day. We thank you for making us your first listen. We appreciate everyone joining us here for the show today. Let's talk about Walker Little. Walker Little's going into his fourth year after being a second-round pick in the 2020 draft, or 2020, or is it 2021 or 20? Let's see, 20, 21, 22, 23. No, it was the 2021 draft, the same draft that the Jaguars got Trevor Lawrence. Walker Little, second-round pick. I think he's 45th overall. Former five-star recruit, picked out of Stanford, and didn't play a lot of college football, missed a year because of injury, and then missed another year with COVID. Therefore, Walker Little was relatively inexperienced but talented once he came to the NFL. And sometimes, the NFL isn't nice to people that haven't played a lot, that haven't had a lot of repetition, and it takes a while to get going, especially when the Jaguars, people needed his production because the Jaguars were very, very porous. That means they're very thin at offensive line, right? They couldn't absorb a whole bunch of stuff. Shout out to me being a former barber instructor, being able to use that word. But they the fans really needed him. The situation with Walker is he actually needed more development, and what it was a real high ceiling situation with him. High ceiling, low floor, and I think that's what it still is. His floor is extremely his floor is actually high. His floor as a player is he's adequate. He's going to play 10 years in the league. The ceiling part of it is, can he actually live up to that potential that he had when he was drafted? And that's a big question. He hasn't so far, but if the Jaguars, who want to be a player development type team, no one would be questioning too much about Walker Little's draft status, considering that he didn't play much in college. Had the Jaguars been winning at a little bit of a higher clip, like the last 2 years, they've done okay. But if the offensive line itself wasn't a huge question, because the offensive line was a huge question. If they had guys whose contracts were, like, for instance, Cam Robinson, if the Jaguars had played extremely well with the offensive line, but now Cam Robinson, his contract is starting to end, and the Jaguars are starting to give out a lot of money to a lot of players, and they got to make choices. This would be an ideal situation for them to say, we're going to play Cam one more year. We're going to tag Walker Little next year, or try to work out a long-term extension with him. And then we're going to ride with Walker Little for the next 5 or 6 years, along with Anton Harrison, and we got our bookend tackles. That would be the ideal situation. A not so ideal situation is if something happens and Walker Little has to play more. That would mean somebody's getting injured, and that's why I said it's not so ideal. But for Walker Little to get a chance to play, and then at some point the Jaguars halfway through the season and say, nah, he's too good. We've spent and invested too much time in Walker Little to let him go. Let's just offer him an extension right now. And they're able to do it, which that probably won't happen because the Jaguars, I think Trent Baalke doesn't really negotiate contracts during the season. But even if they get into the offseason, they say, hey, man, we're not going to let you hit free agency. We're going to let Cam go. We're going to go ahead and go with you, right? And there's enough to warrant a really, really good contract, but there's also not enough to break the bank, right? Almost the way the Jaguars, when they re-signed Cam Robinson, there wasn't enough to break the bank or to feel like that he was going to be a liability with the money that you were going to pay him. But there was enough that you said, no, but we can give him some good money. Now, he got sort of the same deal that Deion Dawkins got in Buffalo. Deion Dawkins has ascended to another level, whereas Cam Robinson has battled those injuries. But nobody's still saying Cam wasn't worth it at the time that they decided to pay him. So the situation with Walker Little can be good if he gets an opportunity somehow to prove that he has value, or even if he doesn't get on the field to prove that he has that value. If the opportunity never presents itself, but they see the work and they can use their scout's eye to say, we're just going to ink him. I'm talking about a 3-year deal for $28 million or a 4-year deal for $39 million. I'm just throwing wild numbers out there because those numbers don't sound like a whole bunch of money, but when it has a lot of guarantees on it, and maybe to tell Walker Little, like, look, man, you need to kind of hang around here a little bit. There's something good for you over here. You turned the corner with us. Don't go somewhere else and have to learn something else, right? It helps if the Jaguars win 12 games or 11 games and then make a nice little run in the playoffs. It absolutely helps that situation. If that scenario happens that way, then they can say that would be, in my opinion, the first big fish that they could go player development. There it is right there. Took 4 years, but that's all right. We got to it. And Walker Little's 25, 26 years old, bro. But that's what we need to do. Player development. Took a little while, but we got there. I wouldn't say Tyson Campbell or Andre Cisco fall into that because they've been playing. Walker Little hasn't been playing at a very critical position. But it would allow you to solidify the continuity of your offensive line while paying a dude that you invested a lot of time in. That's why this training camp is so important, because I don't know if he's going to get a chance to do it if Cam Robinson, and we hope Cam Robinson is able to live up to it in a contract year and play well. And we hope Anton Harrison stays healthy. And we hope Ezra Cleveland is as good as they think. And we hope Brandon Sheriff. That way you won't see Walker Little. That's the ideal situation. However, there's another scenario where they know what they have in the kid, and he shows that improvement. And he makes it hard for them to keep him off the field, but they feel real good that if somebody gets hurt, they can plug him in. The Eagles had a guy like that a couple of years ago named Mulatalu, I believe that's his name. He was in and out of the lineup, but he was a valuable member. At first, wasn't really a starter, was a swing guy, got hurt, and then came back. And I think he plays with the Steelers now, but he was a very, very good player for them who just needed an opportunity. He was their sixth guy. The Cowboys had guys like that forever. In fact, when we signed Jeremy Parnell, he was that guy. He was a guy that they really didn't want to let go, but they knew that they couldn't keep him because they had a future Hall of Famer on one side and another guy on the other side who was playing really, really well. So they had to let him go. This is what I want Walker Little to do to the Jaguars. I want Walker Little to be sitting there and people calling on at the trade deadline, people that need offensive linemen, and Jack saying, no, he's not available. No, we're going to keep him. And no, we ain't trading Cam Robinson either. We paid all that money. Let him go ahead and finish out the regular season. As long as Walker has an understanding, that could be the poster child for what they're trying to do. However, it could also work the other way, that if he is a second round pick that spends 4 years here in development and he never develops, and now you got to address that position because Cam Robinson is going to be a free agent as well. Maybe the answer is to move Anton Harrison back over to left tackle and then find another right tackle, or maybe he's already on the roster in Foster or in Cooper Hodges. Either way, the Jaguars have a chance to be exactly what they want to be, or they have a chance to also show that that's not who they want to be. You ain't going to hit on every pick, but there's a good chance that could happen. I'm going to get to the mailbag questions for you, and then we're going to talk about old and new stuff that everybody's going crazy about. Uniforms. The Jaguars kind of stealthily, sort of indirectly had some highlights rolling and posted on social media. Stripes on pants and uniforms look like old throwback uniforms, and it has the folks going crazy. I'll answer everything I know about them, which ain't much, and then get to your mailbag questions where I mention you by name. We're going to do that in segment 3. After I remind you, if you're watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day and you have to turn down the volume with all that shouting, make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, we're going to get to these mailbag questions and talk about all the things you wanted to discuss. We'll do it just a second here on Locked On Jaguars. Today's show is brought to you and sponsored by Gametime. Have you ever heard this? When you're waiting to the last minute to do something, you ever heard somebody say your procrastination and your lack of planning does not constitute an emergency on my part? Yeah, I've heard that too. Got on my nerves, but they were right. Gametime ain't going to tell you that, because Gametime specializes in you being a procrastinator, or maybe you didn't have the money. You had to wait to the last minute to buy tickets to your favorite Major League Baseball game. Maybe you had to wait to buy those comedy show tickets. That's all right, because they prioritize last minute deals where you can save up to 60% off last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, etc. You can do that at Gametime, man. And I would suggest you get on it with their zone deals, all-in pricing, seat views, the lowest price guarantee, and the Gametime ticket coverage. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code. I'm going to spell it out for you. This is the code, LOCKEDONNFL. You ready? LOCKEDON NFL. That simple. All one word for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, third and final segment here on Locked On Jaguars, where it's your team every day. We thank you for making us your first listen. We are not going to delay it anymore. I think I may have answered some of the questions that are already here on Mailbag, but I will go through each and every one of them and do the absolute best that I can. Somebody asked me already. They said, what do you know about the uniform, Wig? What do you know? Rob, I don't know anything. I know exactly what you know. That's why on social media I put the eye emoji because I see what they're doing. I haven't had any information, and I wouldn't spoil it anyway. Let the Jaguars roll this out how they want to roll it out. But I do think that it's inevitable that they appear to what they're going to do is answer questions that people had about the uniforms and create an opportunity also for people to purchase new gear. And I think it's a win-win situation. Always want to pay homage to the dudes that did it. It's funny about uniforms, though. I can recall people wanting those uniforms to change and said they were boring. So you got to be careful what you ask for. You know, you don't want them. You want them to change. You want them to get better. And then 10, 15 years later, okay, I want the old ones back. So good thing to put them in the rotation if you're the Jaguars. Paul Martin asked this question. The O-line seems to be in good depth, but there's an inevitable decision that will have to be made soon. What do you think happens at left tackle throughout the season? And do you think either Robinson or Little will be on the Jags next season? Paul, you are omniscient because if you listen to the first 2 segments of this show, I just told you exactly how I feel about him. In fact, I was thinking about this, and then when I saw your question yesterday, this is what I mean by you guys becoming program directors, because when I saw your question yesterday, I said, ooh, he hit the hot spot because that's exactly what I was going to talk about. So hopefully at some point during segment 1 or 2, you would nod your head and take a bow, man, and salute because you were one of the people that actually pushed me to do this show. And that's why I love interaction, because you're answering questions from a local perspective that the fans actually want to hear. And it was a very educated, very, very good question that really was the catalyst for me doing the show like I did it today. So I really appreciate it. And I ain't gonna give you no money, but all good, man. I'll give you the salute, and that's even better than money. Something, money, power, and respect. The last one is better. Tell me where you heard that at. Shout out to Kendrick Lamar. All right, Nitro. Nitro says, who has the most pressure this season, Doug or Trent? In a hypothetical, what is hypothetical? In a hypothetical world, if Doug gets the boot, could you see Ryan Nielsen be Doug's replacement after 1 season? Ooh. Let's get the meat off that bone real quick, because I'm going to tell you right now, man, that's a lot to unpack. That's a lot. All right. So for me to answer this question, I have to go into my mode of thinking that things didn't go so well this year. And I'm not ready to do that, but I'll do it just for the sake of this question. I don't want to go, it's a week before training camp. I don't want to go, what happens if things go wrong? But for you, I'll do it today. And I'm going to tell you right now, yes. Who's under the most pressure, Doug or Trent? Yes. Both of them jokers, or as we say in the hood, both of them, BOFA. Both of them would be under tremendous pressure. Now, it depends on what the perception is of the team. Just like last year, the perception down the stretch was that the Jaguars couldn't stop the run when they needed to stop the run, and they had too many games where dudes was running wide open and the defense wasn't progressing, so they moved on past the defense. Everybody can argue with the defensive staff, and folks can argue back and forth and say, well, they wouldn't have been in the situation they were in if the defense wasn't getting all of those turnovers in those first 11 games. All of that stuff is true. However, a decision was made, and it was one that most people agreed with, right? Well, they also wanted Press to be gone out of here too, but the Jaguars stood tough and stood tall. If you think about the way Shad Khan has been talking about what we can no longer do, how the expectation has to go up, how he was disappointed in last season, and how everybody's sort of been put on notice that, look, he has He paid. Trevor Lawrence got paid. Josh Allen got paid. This is no longer a situation where if you don't succeed, you're going to blame it on a lack of talent. And if you do blame it on a lack of talent, you better look right at the dude that's responsible for that talent, and that is Trent Baalke. So I don't think it'll get bad enough for this situation to happen, but I can tell you something that is true about this. It could improve enough, or it could kind of stay the same where you don't see the Jaguars having this thought that, okay, this is the answer. We got our guy. But then if the defense plays lights out with how infectious Ryan Nielsen is, and then people are going to start trying to ask him, for job interviews to be a head coach, based on the way that I've heard people talk about him. And I'm talking about people at the teams in Atlanta and New Orleans where he coached prior to this and how players gravitate towards him. If the players continue to gravitate towards him, if he is a fan favorite, and if somehow the Jaguars don't live up to their expectations, and I'm not saying it has to be all terrible, but if that happens, you could see a situation where I remember it was Lovie Smith and who was it? Dirk Cutter. A situation where, all right, Lovie, you're good enough in Tampa, but you know what? We're about to lose Dirk Cutter, and we need him more than we need you. So we'll fire you and elevate him. It didn't work out, but sometimes it thinks that way. Can they get in a situation where they realize they've gone as far as they could go with the guys that they have, but they don't want to lose a guy who is an up-and-coming star, and then they do something? Absolutely they can. So I think the Jaguars can't stay where they are. They have to actually improve. This doesn't mean everything has to fall apart, but they have to actually improve for those scenarios to not manifest themselves. All right, good question, Nitro. Gamma Supreme says, does Trevor step into the top 5 convo this season? I think if you didn't say if he was going to be a top 5 quarterback, so I'm glad. But if he steps into the convo where you're talking about, like honorable mention, when you talk, guys want to argue about who, not number 1, 2, or 3, but it's an argument between number 4 and number 8, who deserves to be in the back end of the top 5. I think if he is even mentioned in those scenarios, then he's already won. All right. Somebody, Gareth Bell asked me a question about Doug. He used the word I can't. He said, is it blank or bust for, and actually the word he used kind of means it's negative. He probably should have said, is it boom or bust? Because the word he used reminds with it. If it's that or bust for Doug, if we fail to make the playoffs again, given this is now his team. I think I answered that question a couple of days ago. I don't think they can stay the same. I think they have to actually show some improvement, because if they don't, it could be put to Shad to say, hey, look, Doug isn't the problem, but he's also not the solution. We'd have to see how things go. Now with the uniforms. So Ethan asked me how many throwbacks we getting. Don't know. Rob asked me, what do you know? Don't know. Troy Dixon just said, old school, baby, old school. And that's funny to me. So Brandon Duval said, white pants, teal jerseys. Yeah, they've been wearing that forever. So, I mean, that's not telling me much, Brandon, but I appreciate you reaching out. But the thing is what's in a uniform? I'm going to tell you what makes a uniform look good. The same thing that makes a weird number like number 29 or number 43 look good. Troy Polamalu had number 43. 43 is one of the worst numbers you can wear in the NFL, but it looked good on him. Eric Dickerson wore number 29. It's one of the worst numbers you can wear for a running back, but it looked good on him. I remember guys like Larry Sanders had number 37 and they were running backs, and Lester Hayes had 37 and it looked good on them. I remember folks thought number 18 looked terrible until Peyton Manning wore it in the NFL and it looked good on him. What am I saying? The uniform is just like a number, man. It's all whatever's on the field. Whatever's on the field, I don't care. They could have their pants on backwards, and guess what? If they win, people are going to say it looks good. Chris Cross did it. They had a whole career, those little kids, when I was in the 90s, wearing their clothes backwards, and everybody thought it was cool. Those NBA dudes wearing them big-ass suits, they thought that was cool. But guess what? It turns out LeBron, Wade, and Bosh and Melo, they could all play. So now they can pick at those suits and say it looked atrocious, but you look good wearing it, because guess what? Didn't matter. The Fab Five with those big baggy uniforms and those short socks. Ooh, I thought of the picture of God, Sham God, with those pants that look like the bell bottoms everybody's wearing. Nobody cares if you win. If you win, they'll like whatever you have on, bro. It does not matter. It doesn't matter. But if y'all get excited about it, and it's another thing to get you excited, good. But I tell you what, come week 3 or 4, if they ain't won no games yet, y'all ain't gonna give a damn about no stripes. Yeah, y'all gonna care about stripes, the referees, and then y'all gonna try to put Doug Peterson and Trent Baalke in prison and put them in them Ray Gibson and Claude Banks stripes and run them out of here. That's what you're gonna do. Yeah, man. But it's fun to talk about that kind of stuff. But the bottom line is, if they win, then they could be wearing dungaree and denim jumpsuits with no t-shirt underneath it and boots that don't match, and y'all ain't gonna care. Trust me, you won't care one bit. All right, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today, now available on the free Fire TV channels app. Tomorrow, I'm going to talk about Trayvon Walker, one of my favorite people to talk about because of the kind of dude he is and what I think he's going to accomplish this year and how I think he's going to become a household name around the National Football League. I'll do that tomorrow. Make sure you join me, and y'all take care of each other. We thank you for making us your team every day here locally on Locked On Jaguars. Until then, take care.